Hi guys! So the Vinci Stradivarius violin is being sold by Tarisio and they are expecting a record price. A little bit later in the video I'm actually going to go live to the auction to see what price the instrument will actually fetch. So that's really exciting, and you may have heard about it in the news already, but you'll see my actual reaction. What makes a Vinci Stradivarius such a valuable instrument? Well, firstly, the Vinci Stradivarius was made in 1714. That time in Stradivarius's life was what they call the golden period of his work. And there's a decade in his golden period that they say was the best decade in the golden period. And that's the decade from 1710 to 1720. Believe it or not, Stradivarius was no spring chicken around that time. In a time where a lot of people died in their 60s and 70s, he actually turned 70 years old the year this violin was made. Can you believe it? And he was still being extremely productive. Well, it wasn't just him. He actually had a workshop of really skilled makers. So in the year, there are still 15 violins in existence that were made by Stradivarius's workshop, including the Dolphin, the Joachim Mar, and the Perlman. They were quite prolific in those years of the 1710s. And he had a number of people working with him in the workshop, including people like Joseph Guarnerius, Carlo Bergonzi, Francesco Gobetti, Alessandro Galliano, Michelangelo Bergonzi, and his two sons, Omer Bono and Francesco Stradivarius. So it was quite an operation, and Stradivarius around that time was already doing very well. The phrase being rich as Stradivarius was a very common phrase because in the time before, the Stradivarius workshop was really well known with the elite of the late Renaissance. And if you wanted a good instrument, you would get it from Antonio Stradivarius. In his will, you can see at the end, he left quite a wealth to his children and his wife. This violin also has a very interesting story. Nobody really knows what happened to the instrument before 1881. But the story from 1881, there's a very clear lineage. I'll tell that story a little bit later, but first I'll talk a little bit about the instrument itself and what makes it so special. So the top plate's actually been analyzed by the well-known dendrochronologist who analyzes the tree rings on the top plate. By looking at the timber, he could see that the very youngest tree ring, so the last tree ring that was on there, was from 1693. And the top plate was probably made from the same wood that was also used in quite a few other instruments, including the Joachim Mar Stradivarius violin that I was talking about earlier. The beautiful back looks so similar to the wood used on the 1710 Vietong, the 1715 Duke of Cambridge, the 1712 Earl Spencer, who was Diana Spencer's grandfather, and of course there's the 1714 Da Vinci Strad. And that piece of wood is just really beautiful, as you can see. And some people thought that the name Da Vinci Stradivarius came because that piece of wood is so beautiful that it was like a work of art. But that's actually not the case. It's quite a different story and it's quite unexpected. But before I tell that story, I'll actually start telling you a little bit about its history. So the first known owner of the Da Vinci Stradivarius, which wasn't called that at the time, was Arthur de Emerville. Now, I'm not French, so I probably pronounced it wrongly. And he was a well-known botanist, and this park was actually named after him. And 7 years later, it was bought by Frédéric de Gens, so it was still stayed in France. So it's quite possible that maybe Violin or someone like that had the instrument in Paris at the moment. In 1888, the violin went to Antoine Jacques Fauchy. If I am not mistaken, he actually knew Degas, and Degas painted his wife. And that's where it becomes interesting, because in 1923, the instrument went to the violin shop of Caressa Francais. And as they were selling the instrument, there's a little line saying, "We baptized the violin Da Vinci." They also named two other instruments, the Michelangelo Stradivarius and the Titan Stradivarius. But here's the entry. You can see the entry down here where they actually said that that's what they named it. And the name stuck. Now, in 1923, it just had a little transference to another player called Charles Tunsch from Berlin. But he only kept it for a very short time. And that's where Emil Hermann, the dealer, took it over to America. And in America, it went to the Ukrainian-born violinist Tosha Seidel. And with Tosha Seidel, it probably got its biggest fame and was most heard because it was actually heard in the movie The Wizard of Oz.
Over the rainbow, skies are blue.
As well as a few other movies like Lady and the Tramp. Tosha Seidel was a really talented violinist. He played with a lot of emotion and had the same teacher as Yesha Heifetz. Funnily enough, my violin teacher's teacher was also taught by Leopold Auer, who taught Tosha Seidel, but that's just a little link, which is kind of nice. If I'd practiced, I could maybe be a little bit better. So Tosha Seidel really made the instrument famous with his playing. The instrument itself probably wasn't as well known as Tosha Seidel, but he is a very important part of the story. After that, it went to the Canadian violinist Muriel Rubens. Then the violin passed through a few more owners until it made it to the Japanese Montesugo collection of instruments. Tokuji Montesugo runs a Japanese restaurant chain. He just loves the great Cremonese instruments, and he makes the instruments from his collection available to young musicians via a competition. But now the instrument is going to a new owner. Also, the guys from TwoSet Violins recently went to the Tarisio auction house.
So this is the vault. The code is 1234. And we go, yeah. So, whoa.
And you can get a really good insight into how things work in the auction house.
I'm so scared I'm gonna scratch it.
So Luigi Tarisio lived in Milan until he died in 1854, and he was a collector of Stradivarius memorabilia. He owned over 24 Stradivarius violins, as well as a good part of the original Stradivarius workshop, like all the tools and things like that. When Tarisio died, the famous French violin maker Violin got a horse and carriage and went as fast as he could to Milan, and he bought the entire Tarisio collection of instruments. There were over 100 well-known Italian instruments in that collection. It was one of the biggest buys in Violin's life, and it probably was one of the things that made him the most famous French violin maker. Let's have a look how this auction is going. So the auction started at $8 million US dollars. That's right, $8 million US dollars. It started on Wednesday, the 8th of June, 2022. And I'm going to be watching this auction live now and see where the price is going to go. I'm kind of excited. I mean, you know, the prices these instruments are fetching is kind of putting it out of reach of most players. I mean, who's got a spare $10-15 million lying around. Even if you're a famous violinist, that's not the kind of money you normally got, like, just as spare change. In the 1980s and 1990s, famous violinists were still able to buy their Stradivarius violins. People like Anazofi Mutta, Nigel Kennedy, and even Joshua Bell was able to buy an instrument a lot more recently. But once it went above $10 million, it actually started becoming kind of more an object of investment, which is kind of maybe a bit sad for the instruments, but it also maybe it means that some other really great instruments being made by modern makers might be able to get into the limelight as well, because they will be played by some of the great violinists. Now, if you're wondering why Stradivarius instruments have such a high value, have a look at this video I made recently talking about that, because that'll give you a really good insight. Is there some kind of secret that Stradivarius had that no other violin maker knew that made his instrument so much more special? Was it his varnish? Did he have some kind of special wood? Did he have some special knowledge that nobody else had? Or what was the reason behind it? So take a look at this video. I'll put up the link now, but if you want to see it after the video, it will be in the suggested video straight at the end of this video. You can just watch to the end and see how much this instrument ended up selling for. Well, guys, it's the middle of the night here in Australia. It is currently 4 a.m. and I've actually gotten up just to see how the auction of the Vinci Stradivarius is going. So the instrument, literally there was an opening bid of $8 million on this instrument. It's an online auction and the reserve was $8 million. So the first bid was literally $8 million. It's currently got 12 minutes remaining. The bid has gone up to $9.5 million, which is quite high. So I'm just going to keep watching it. So there's only 2 bidders at the moment. $9.5 million. Little much, little high for me. Sorry, kids. No more school for you. I bought a violin. It's ridiculous though, isn't it? Like, if you think about it, like, $9.5 million for an instrument. Still at $9.5 million. I think they'd hoped for a fair bit more, because the Lady Blunt sold for $15 million. But I mean, that was quite a famous violin. There we go. We've just seen another bidder. That's the original bidder, called DE. And it's just gone back up to 19 minutes. So they've just added 15 minutes on as someone bid. Let's see if the next person will come back. Yes. So we've got a bid of 10.5 million and it's the same person. So their strategy is just to put in the bid just on 15 minutes remaining. But there's only 2 bidders here at the moment by the looks of things. So I wonder what they're willing to go up to. Here we go, it's made it, back to the DE bidder. Seems to be going up in sort of $500,000 lots. And it's gone back up, so back to the other bidder. So there's only 2 bidders, but they are in a slow motion bidding war here. And we're up to $11.5 million. Yep, and there we go. DE's come right back with $12 million. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes and 1 second remaining. It's just refreshed. And it's still at $12 million. Alright, so we've got 1 minute and 23 seconds remaining here. And this might be it, unless someone decides to put in a bid last second and add another 15 minutes. I'm seriously going to have to go and get a coffee if they do that. Okay, it's just gone back another 15 minutes and 366136. Man, can't you have a more interesting bidder ID? Has come back with $12.5 million. Okay, so we've got 36 seconds remaining. It's at 13 million. Are we all done? All finished. It's 15 seconds to go. Here we go. Ooh, the whole thing just dropped out. You wouldn't want your auction website to drop out 1 second before the hammer. Okay, good. Alright, now here it says completed. So it had 11 bids. Let me see if I can still go back on it. Yeah, there we go. It's back up. Alright, so the violin sold for $13 million. It's the third most expensive violin. And so at $13 million, that's quite impressive. I'm going back to bed. Well, I'll see you at the next auction. So yeah, so it sold for $13 million. It's a lot of money for a violin, and I don't think any player, you know, on even well-known soloists, you know, would probably struggle to pay that amount of money, and it's most likely gone to an investor who will hopefully make it available to players, because these musical instruments just deserve to be played. I know it's over 300 years old, which, you know, at some point, you know, I don't know when, but at some point in the future, you know, it'll be very hard to play them. I know there's some 500-year-old instruments that aren't good to play, but you know, there's different preservation methods, and so some of the English instruments and German instruments that are 500 years old just don't work properly anymore. So here you go, you found it out here, $13 million. It's not quite the auction record they had probably hoped for, but it's still pretty amazing, right? So I'll see you guys next time. If you like my videos, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the little bell so that you find out every time I post a new video. See you guys.